This is the artist, and this is what she can do. A lot of players consider her to be an A-tier killer, who also has some of the best teachable perks in the entire game. She just got the legendary skin, and she is also getting another legendary skin soon. But you know what else she's getting? A nerf to her add-ons, despite being one of the least played killers in the entire game and with a below average kill rate. So why is this the case? Let's try to find the answer in this video, as well as see some ways to make her more interesting for other players to play. To start with, why is the artist considered A tier, and what does she offer that nobody decides to play her? So she is a really unique killer in terms of gameplay. She is ranged, but at the same time, she works in a completely different way to any other projectile attack, as she also works like a control killer and a setup killer combined. Her power allows her to set crows which point forward, and they have infinite range. In short distance, the crow attack will injure survivors, but in longer distances and through walls, they will swarm survivors on contact. So you have to set up another crow in order to hit them and injure them. And this is what makes her so different to the rest of killers. Her range is infinite, at the cost of you having to hit survivors twice. Her anti-loop is very strong, at the cost of you having to set it up in a smart way. Her power allows you to track survivors too if you barely hit a survivor, as it reveals them with killer instinct, so you get info that you can use to your advantage, meaning you need to know macro control of DBD. But this all is also her demise, and the first problem that she has, which makes her not friendly for beginners. Her power is extremely complex, which allows good artist mains to do some crazy stuff when they set up things right, but she is not a good pick for a casual, with one of the hardest powers to understand fully. A good artist can set up her crows in a specific loop so that no matter what, the survivor gets hit by the crows, but a new player will just spam the crows in the loop while the survivor just leaves, wasting a lot of distance. A good artist only needs one crow in order to snipe survivors from afar, while a new player will spam her crows at the start of the match, pointing them at generators, swarm the survivors, but due to the massive cooldown of the crows, they cannot do anything about it. And I mean, why wouldn't they use all 3 crows? That's what the game gives you. Her power requires a lot of mechanical skill, as you have to time the crows right in order to hit survivors attempting to dodge. You require map knowledge in order to know which loops survivors can chain, where you have to place the crows in order to hit them, and which path will survivors take once they are swarmed. And this killer also requires a lot of macro knowledge, as she is one of the only killers in the game capable of pressuring survivors globally in the map while chasing another one. This multitasking, setup, map knowledge killer is just way too much for new players and casuals. When talking about the artist, by far the biggest reason their mains will give you and why they play her is because of the snipes and the other techniques which are exclusive to her. Since her range attack has infinite range, it means you can snipe and end chases with survivors on the opposite side of the map. First, you hit a survivor with one crow, and then you try to either aim the second crow by predicting their pathing, or you can do the shotgun technique by spreading your crows and covering more distance. Slingshotting is using the distance between crows in a very smart way. When you hit survivors, they get 0.75 seconds where they are immune to any other crow attack. But if you space the crows correctly, you can injure survivors from afar, bypassing this restriction. These things do feel incredibly fun to get right and are something that takes good knowledge from the killer, as you can mess this up really easily, which increases the artist's skill ceiling by a lot. With the way her power is designed, the map and your imagination is the limit, as you can get insane hits the more big-brained you are. But as much as the artist can feel very rewarding to play with, she is also one of the killers that gets punished the most for misusing your power. For example, at worst, you can still use Hillbilly to travel around the map even if you don't know how to curve. But with the artist, if you hit a survivor with a crow and then miss, or if you don't use your power correctly and waste it, you have to start all over again. With other ranged killers, like Huntress, who is a free character that new players love, if you miss, you can just try again in order to get a hit, and the same with Deathslinger. Unknown is the most similar as you have to hit survivors twice, but as long as you aim right, you have to only hit them 3 times and you still have your clones to rely on. With the Artist, against a good survivor, you have to hit them 4 times in order to down them from healthy, and anytime you miss, you have to add 2 attempts more. It's even worse with her, because with Unknown, at the very least, in order for survivors to remove the weakened effect, they have to look at you, which means they could be at danger of being sniped at any point if they do not come close to you, wasting their time. But with the Artist, survivors just have to hold the repel action for 8 seconds in order to remove the swarm, and considering the 5-second cooldown after firing, you have around 4 seconds depending on the distance in order to get a second shot at the survivor. And let's not forget the fact that she is the only ranged killer which has her entire power deactivated near hooks. Since she is a setup character like Trapper and Hag, it makes sense that you cannot do this, as you could just swarm the hook with a crow and get hits from far away without the anti-camp mechanic. But you can already do this with Huntress, Slinger or Trickster. You can even do this with Hag, which makes the Artist limit absolutely crazy. With Artist, the moment you hook a survivor, you have a massive 10-meter zone where you cannot do anything, so you are literally powerless against trades, which in comparison to Dracula or Pyramid Head, it's absurd the difference in power. At best, you can attempt to set up a slingshot, but this is so easily countered by survivors and it can be messed up so easy that it's nothing compared to, for example, the Unknown, who can use the power without any limits and hit both survivors at once. And there is another thing that the Unknown beats her at, and that is playing against body blocks. With Huntress or Trickster and even Springtrap, if survivors are body blocking hits, that can be a very big problem for them, as you can take out health states incredibly fast. But with the Artist, body blocks are actually really strong against her. Since her attack is so delayed in how it comes out, a survivor can just run away or go to the left or right from the path of the crow, or get another survivor behind them so they take the injury or swarming. The absolute craziest survivors I have seen are even capable of body blocking survivors from far away so they cannot get sniped, and there is nothing you can do besides either ignoring the body block and going for the M1 or chasing the body blocker. And this is only a problem with the Artist. Huntress can take health states fast, Trickster can absolutely shred survivors with main event, Slinger is extremely lethal in chase, and body blocking him requires a bit more skill. Springtrap becomes an M1 killer after using the axe, and Unknown's UVX can bypass survivors and hit more than one. The worst part is that at the very least, body blocking takes skill, and it's very easy to mess this up, especially in solo queue. But the thing that requires absolutely zero skill is entering a locker in order to completely bypass snipes. The Artist crows make a sound and they can be seen from a distance when they come at you, which reveals the location of the killer or at least her direction. So a smart survivor can move away from the generator when they hear the global sound of the crows launching. But even if you get hit, anytime you enter a locker as a survivor, you remove the swarm completely and instantly. If you are chasing another survivor, this means you cannot do anything about it, as you have to either drop chase to pressure that survivor or just ignore them, as the distance you lose using the crows is not worth the time the survivor spends to enter a locker or just dodge. Personally, the locker dodge is by far one of the worst aspects of her in my opinion, as against a good survivor, your snipes are rendered completely useless because there is a locker near the survivor. The amount of effort to set up a snipe compared to the amount of effort to counter it makes this part of the match feel very frustrating as a killer player, because I feel like no other killer has such an easy counter compared to how hard the killer equivalent is. If locker dodges were to be removed, survivors would have to actually play in a smart way against snipes. They can fake going to one side and then turning, or standing still and counter artists following the path. It's not like I hit every single snipe in my matches, but when I miss, it is purely a skill issue by my part. When a survivor enters a locker, there is nothing I can do but just go there, removing a very fun aspect of the artist. The locker spawning near generators is not the only problem she has, because the artist has a massive map dependency problem. Her crows have infinite range, but the start is what determines which height they go. If you put them in a flat spot, they will be straight with no problem. But if you place them near a stair or hill, then the crows will curve, going up. In maps with a lot of verticality like the game, RPD, any map that has a main building with floors, or something that many artist mains will groan just hearing the name, backwater swamp, your power is also rendered almost useless. Something that is great about her is that the range from her crows is big enough that you can hit survivors in certain positions even if they are higher in elevation, but this is not something you can apply everywhere. Killers that are map dependent is something that is part of the core gameplay of the game. In my opinion, this is not a problem that can be fixed for this killer, so I am not saying this as a complaint, but more so of a fact that this killer has a map dependency downside, which could be the reason that players choose to not play as her. The add-ons of the artist are also another huge problem of hers, because they are extremely boring. One of her iridescents I consider one of the worst in the game, and her charcoal add-on is absolute trash. There is not a single add-on that changes the way she is played, as instead she has add-ons that improve her power in a meta sense. For example, Festering Carrion and Thick Tar make sniping easier, which are feel-good add-ons overall, and then Severed Hands allows you to bypass the crow immunity timer by allowing other survivors to swarm any nearby survivor, which also counters body blocking, making this add-on her best one by far. Matthias' Baby Shoes also allows you to see the aura of survivors when you place the crows, making her way easier to play, but that's it. The worst part is that not only are the vast majority of her add-ons trash, boring or useless, she also for some reason got nerfed in the Springtrap DLC, as her most used add-ons had their values reduced, so she will feel even worse if this patch goes live. Something that I consider to be absolutely crazy when her kill rate is low and nobody complained about these add-ons. Barely anyone plays the artist. It's clear that the devs saw the pick rate and decided to nerf the add-ons instead of understanding that artist just feels bad to play add-onless, and these add-ons compensate for her power feeling bad or being countered so easily, and outside of the ones that I mentioned, all the rest are mediocre or bad. Killers that have bad add-ons are usually very boring to play as, like Pyramid Head for example, as that means there are basically no builds you can do with them that are unique, slowdown perks, and maybe aura reading if you feel adventurous. At least that's the builds I use myself. That adds to her boring factor a lot. But the other problem is that, because of how complex she is, what the majority of killers will do is play her in the easiest way. Instead of sniping, as it's so easy to counter as survivors, and instead of thinking ahead with the crow placements, artists will use crows in loops in order to shut them down. As a survivor, these loops become unusable most of the time. With skill, you can bait a crow or dodge them, but just like the killer players, the easiest way to counter is just leave. Now, if you place them to shut down loops, you waste one token of the 3 crows. If you use another crow in order to hit survivors while they are chaining loops, your cooldown will be higher, so you cannot get a follow-up hit. All the rest of range killers can punish survivors both in the loops as well as when chaining them, but the artist requires a lot more skill in order to do that. This leads to the majority of her games to be hold W simulators because it is the most efficient way to counter her, and this is an extremely boring way to play for both sides, as you play more like a zoner, using your power to force survivors to take bad pathing in order to get an M1 hit. Why play artist when you can play any other range killer and have a much better success rate? And they are much more fun because they do not require any setup, you just point and click. while with the artist you have to set up, predict, zone in advance, and hit. It's clear to see how better the rest of range killers are, as they feel much more smooth and direct. Huntress is so much easier compared to the artist. When you use them as a new player, it's clear what you can do with the Huntress, but artists require so much more setup and knowledge to do. It's also knowledge exclusive for DBD, because no other shooter game has a character that works like artist, but there are various that works like Huntress, Slinger, or Trickster. Outside of Snipes, there is absolutely no reason to use artist for the majority of players over Blight or Ghoul. Both of those killers are easier and get much better results, while also being much flashier than the artist since their powers are mobility based, and not the constant slowdown you experience when placing crows and using them. These reasons are why I think, despite having zero balance changes since release, and despite being considered strong because of how hypothetically strong she is, the artist is such an unpopular killer in the game. There are some other problems she has, like for example how boring her weapon design is for a long while, as all of her weapons were the same ink color, which luckily the devs have started fixing nowadays with more color on the weapons, as well as the jarring sounds she does, which can be problematic for people with accessibility issues. But I think this is only like 1 or 2% of the percentage of people that choose not to play as artist. So, how would I fix her? As someone who loves this character, and as the character which started my channel in the first place, I want to suggest some things that I am sure would make this character much better. First of all, like I said earlier, lurker dodges are extremely frustrating for the killer side. In my opinion, no other killer has such an easy counterplay for how hard the power itself is. For example, against Knight, you still need knowledge to dodge the guards. Leatherface needs great timing with the lockers. Victor can stay in the lockers once you enter it. Legion can attempt to counter you too. But with the artist, she just lost the pressure and she has her power on cooldown while chasing another survivor. Without locker dodges, now artists will not feel as map dependent as before, and especially not as frustrating. I do understand that this is a buff to her, and it removes an entirely new counterplay option for survivors. But to claim locker dodging takes any skill is just absolutely crazy to me, and I would love to be proven wrong with an example of a killer that has an even easier counterplay or the reasons why this should stay in the game. Like I said many times, I miss a lot of my snipes, as it requires skill to perform, so it should at the very least not be countered so easily by pressing one button. And since we are on the topic of snipes, another thing I would love to be changed is a small detail that I think is a game design miss. Why is there no sound when you snipe survivors from afar? With Huntress, Springtrap, Trickster, or with Unknown, you get a noise that lets you know the projectile hit them or downed them. It's extremely satisfying to hit those shots, but it's not with the artist, as you have to either hear the scream or look at the HUD. Even Vecna has a very satisfying sound for snipes, which is a character that can barely do that. In my opinion, having the feedback sound of the close range hit, which sounds crunchy and satisfying, would be amazing to hear globally when you get a snipe hit. I am sure that this is a change that many artist mains would absolutely love. Now, this is by far the most controversial take, but since the facecam mechanic is part of the game, I see no reason why the artist should be punished so hard for using her power near a hook. Huntress can do it, Houndmaster can do it, Bubba can do it, Dracula can do it, Hag can put traps near the hook, so why can't artist? I see no world where Dracula and Pyramid Head can pierce the survivors with the power in order to guarantee a trade, but the artist is completely powerless in the endgame. It feels bad, it feels clunky, and it would make her so much more better to use overall. And the final thing that I would personally change is add-on related. Just like with many killers that had these changes in the past, I would love if at the very least, Thick Tar and Festering Carrion were made partially base kit in order to make artists not as punishing to play as, and this would make her less clunky overall. But as for the rest of her add-ons, I would love it if they just made a fun rework like they did with Legion, Ghostface, and Freddy Krueger. Those killers have what I consider to be perfect add-on design, where each one is unique. It allows them to have a lot of build variety, and this would make artists so much more fun and add a lot of build potentials that I am sure other content creators would showcase. Some add-ons like Ink Egg, Severed Tongue, and Thorny Nest are not that bad, but Charcoal Stick or Automatic Drawing are just boring. I would love add-ons that completely change the way she is played. For example, an add-on that only lets you place one crow but it's bigger in size, like a shotgun, or allowing you to carry more crows but they are thinner and faster in speed. Give me a brown add-on that makes her crows disintegrate faster, as that would help players that set up crows poorly during a chase, or another brown add-on that increases the range where the crows can actually injure survivors before they become swarms. How about an iridescent that makes it so that anytime a survivor is swarmed with a crow, they have the tear radius on themselves? An add-on that turns the crows invisible after placing them and removing the trail they leave when shot, or a very rare add-on that allows you to let crows stay there without disintegrating if you don't use them, so you can play artists even more like a setup character. Or another one that gives her haste when you swarm a survivor at the cost of only starting the cooldown once the survivor repels the crows, so they can choose to keep the swarm, but you are faster when you have it. These are just ideas off the top of my head that would make the artist play differently and allow her to use more build variety, all for the sake of allowing players to play her in a different way. Of course, outside of the base kit additions, this change requires much more effort to be put in, so at this point, it's just a wish I would love to see become a reality in DBD. With all of these changes, I believe that at the very least, the artist will feel so much better to play for her mains. Her power will be a bit better for new players to use, and with the new add-on changes, I feel like it will increase the build variety that she has. The artist is a very unique killer, with a power that I would consider to be almost perfect, and I love just how much of a skill ceiling it has. Niche powers like hers deserve to exist in DBD, so I hope the devs do not forget about her. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my takes, and if you think these changes are good overall, especially if you are an artist main. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day!